This is Vaelgor and Ezzorak. This is the inherited 5th boss of the raid. This is the 4th boss of Void Spire, except you can also go to it second because it opens up after evolution, but you probably don't because you most likely want the 10% HP damage nerf as well as the extra shield during the intermission. Right, this is a 2-target fight. These bosses have 2 conditions to prevent an enrage, aside from you kill one early and then the other one starts enraging. These bosses cannot be within 15 yards of each other or they will enrage. And the other stuff is the bosses must be within 10% HP of each other, otherwise they will also enrage. So I will most likely request for one of the ranged DPS to keep track of the 2 bosses, preferably someone who's already tap targeting between both. And you should be calling out that the HP is becoming uneven, somewhere around 5 to 8% HP. Don't call it out at 9% and it's too late, and you just see someone just boosting like crazy, and all of a sudden, we just wipe. On No One Heroic, the bosses do something different. One of them is flying. What this means is that this flying boss will always be opposite of whatever the ground dragon is. The ground dragon tank is going to be the tank that controls. So, one moment. So, that we have this. We're going to grab this. This dragon flies opposite. This dragon will attempt to drag whichever tank is trying to pick it up towards it. So they move over. Very quickly, we'll talk about the tank buster. Usually it's called something like Veil Wing or Veil something. I think it's, let me see, Veil Wing and Whack Fang. These are a combo hit, not necessarily on the tank. For Veil Wing, this is going to be a tank buster, and then it's going to do a real cone, 35 yards, and it's going to inflict the bleed and knock you back. So the tank needs to face it sideways. The other stuff that Veil Wing is going to do is it's going to place a debuff on that tank. And for every melee attack after that tank buster, this tank would take additional shadow damage. And this buff will stack up. So that is what causes the tank swap. You don't want to be swapping on every single stack. It'll be up to the tanks on how many stacks. It'll most likely more so depend on Vaelgor's Whack Fang. Vaelgor's Ezzorak's Whack Fang. So for Ezzorak's Whack Fang, this is again a tank buster. It's going to cause future melee attacks to put up a heal absorb on the tank, stacking based off of how many Whack Fangs that tank has taken up until they swap. And then this real 35-yard cone will instead stun you. So again, just don't be behind both tanks don't be behind both dragons as they're doing the tank buster. There is a few mechanics that will cause you to move around the room. The most notable one being this Dread Breath. This Dread Breath is pointed at a random player. This player needs to move away from the raid. Every single player hit by this Dread Cone will get feared, and on No One Heroic, this person will get a movement speed shield. So for the healers, you're going to want to dispel that as quick as possible. If you have some way of removing fear yourself, feel free to use it. This is No Beam. This is Vaelgor's main mechanic. This is going to be targeted at the tank. The tank can move out of it, but shouldn't, because you want to stay in it to reduce the number of stacks it has. At the very end of this pushback beam, I don't even know what Ezzorak's doing at the moment. There's going to be an orb that spawns, and then as the orb fully spawns, everyone's going to get a 10-yard circle. You're going to want to wait for this orb to fully spawn, and then you can start moving. You notice that Bantus is moving basically as soon as this orb forms. If you try to put your position before the orb spawns, this will change. This circle that you see is individual to each player. It's always going to be 10 yards away from you, with the center point being wherever the orb is. You're going to want to snap this tether at some point. The tether is going to attempt to pull you in. The strength depends on how many stacks of the beam the tank soaked. And this tether, when snapped, is going to do damage to everyone. You see it snaps, does damage. The very last tether that gets snapped, you'll notice they leave it on a healer. This is going to put a dot on the raid. You see decent chunk of damage, and then it's roughly a 5-second dot. So most likely leave it to a healer. We might leave it to a tank, depending on what's easier. It will most likely be a healer just because the healer can control when do we want that large boost of damage and when do we want to deal with the dot. Now, during that mechanic, you probably noticed Ezzorak was casting Void Howl. Void Howl, this is just upfront damage. These are going to spawn ads. If you're a tanky spec, you should try to stack with someone else who's tanky, just to make sure that they'll a lot closer grouped together. When these ads spawn, you're just going to AoE and nuke them down. These ads have a cast. This will put a stacking dot debuff if it casts on a person. Kick CC. We will most likely use a bunch of mass clips for this as well, just to make the fight easier. Alright. And then we have one more mechanic for P1. This will be Ezzorak's Gume. This is going to be aimed by the tank who's currently on Ezzorak. A little bit hard to see because it's on the right side. So you see Ezzorak's aiming this stuff. It's going to summon an orb. This orb must be soaked. You'll notice it starts at purple with a circle underneath it. As people are soaking it, the circle shrinks and eventually it hits blue. When it's blue and there's no more circle around it, it's just the orb by itself. We've soaked as much as we can, and we'll reduce the rate that image by as much as possible. When this orb finally touches the wall, depending on how much we've shrunk it, it's going to grow into a void zone. So you see right here, void zone grows. Now, one important stuff to note, when this orb is sought, if an orb touches the edge of a previous circle, so where my mouse is on the top left, if the orb touches this section of the circle, it will activate early. So for the tank, make sure that you're aiming it so that it's just slightly past the edge of the circle every single time, and that will maximize the number of space we have in the room. Now, as for this Gume Silk itself, there are a few components to it. On normal, this needs to be 4 total people soaking it. So, let me see. That's tank plus 3 people. On heroic, this is tank plus 4 people, so 5 people in total. And then on mythic, this is tank plus 6 people, so 7 people in total. And we'll talk about the mythic specific stuff later on. But just know that you basically want to soak this. On heroic, the gimmick of this Gume is that as you touch the Gume, you get a debuff that increases the damage of the next Gume you touch to almost one-shot territory. So we do want an alternating group of 5. So five people will soak on heroic, and then another group of 5 will soak on heroic. I'm most likely going to assign a lot more people than that, just to play it safe, just in the event that someone dies. And that is it for P1. You'll repeat for that section up until the bosses hit 100 energy. So when the bosses hit 100 energy, right here, both of them are going to fly. The Lightbound Vaelgor is going to propel a radiant barrier in the middle, and then the bosses are going to constantly take rage-wide damage while they're flying around until their energy is drained. While you stay inside this barrier, you'll get a shield. and this will act as a DR for the weight wide damage. The shield can absorb 75% of the damage you take, 25% gets pierced straight through. And then during this whole entire intermission, we have this big ad that we're aiming to kill. I believe this ad enrages after each 45 seconds, or I should more correctly say it ramps up every 45 seconds, or it gains 75% movement speed, 75% attack speed, not movement speed. So if we don't kill it in 45 seconds, it gains 75% attack speed. If we don't kill it for another 45 seconds, it'll gain another 75% attack speed. And that's going to choke the tank a lot. When the people are going to get these split circles, make sure you stay inside the barrier while you're going out. Everyone else should be closer towards the middle. If you're near the outside, just remember you want to stay inside this barrier because of the lot of damage on the outside. If you really have to step out for whatever reason, you have to hit a DR as you're walking out. Right? It's better for you to get cleaved by the circle and stay in this barrier than it is for you to walk out because you're scared of getting clipped by the circle. Unless you have a way DR, of course. We're going to continue with this, and eventually the dragons are going to land, and what changes is now Ezzorak's on the ground and Vaelgor's in the air. So now it's the Ezzorak tank that's controlling the movement of both. Alright, so that's normal and heroic. Going into Mythic. I'll go ahead and just pull this up. So on Mythic, very first off, both dragons are on the ground. Both tanks are responsible for the movement. There's no one tank is on the ground and they're controlling the movement of both. Which will make the tank swaps a little bit of an interesting case. You have to figure out which cast is appropriate for you to attempt to do the tank swap on. Right. So very first Mythic change, this Dread Breath, the fear is changed so that instead of a movement speed down while you're feared, this is a movement speed up. And as you might have seen looking around, there is an edge of the room that you could just walk off. So it's very important that this fear person gets dispelled pretty quick. We don't want them to have this increased movement speed fear and just walk off the edge of the room. Do make sure that, again, because this is a cone, you're not pointing at anyone. You're moving in such a way where you're the only one getting hit. Alright. No beam. This mechanic gets changed ever so slightly on Mythic. I have no idea why this failure was trying to reduce the stacks by stepping into it. The Mythic mechanic change is the very first person to break this tether is going to drop a whole bunch of swirlies all around the map. You can see right here. There's just swirlies all over the place while you're trying to get these void orbs summoned. So it's basically you're summoning this, and then as soon as these orbs pop up, someone has a chance to break the tether boost, and then it's going to summon all these swirlies. Everyone has to dodge. Most likely we should assign this to one of our less mobile players, just because the tether pulls you in, and they're probably going to struggle dodging the swirlies while also breaking their own tether, or just dealing with the tether if it comes down to that. So that's the no beam change. Not really a whole lot to it. It's just extra swirlies to dodge. The Ezzorak change is a lot more apparent. So on this Goom cast, again, as I was mentioned, 7 people need to soak this. It's tank plus 6 other people. The Mythic change is that as people soak this Goom, they're going to pulsate a 8-yard AoE. And this AoE will put the same heroic bone stack. So if you get clipped by this, you can no longer soak. So essentially, every single person who is doing the soak, you can see the size of the AoE, has to be separated so that they're not clipping the next person in the soak order. So most likely this will be tank is pretty close to the boss doing one soak. We'll probably be able to fit one roughly where this Fury Warrior is standing relative to the center of the boss, and then one melee that's max melee, and then the other 4 range. But if we have a lot of range, we'll most likely assign more of the range group to this mechanic. We'll most likely assign extra people as well. I think we'll most likely assign each group to be either 8, or 9. Worst case, we'll just do 10, just because I don't want to deal with the idea of we have 7 assignments, one person dies by accident, and then we're just trying to scramble and figure out how we're going to get the last person in. We should just play it safe and just have the extra person in. It does mean that with each person that we add in, there's not going to be a backup available for the other group, but each group should already have the 1 or 2 backups per side. You're going to notice we're going to continuously shrink it. It's off screen now, but it's been shrunk down to blue color. It's just the orb. As I was mentioning earlier, you can see there's this small circle around it while it's still in the it hasn't been fully soaked yet phase. So that is it for the Mythic mechanics in P1. You notice also how big this is. Like, this is a fully shrunk orb, and it's all the way on the edge. The other Mythic mechanic happens during the intermission. We're not going to talk about it all too much. I have no idea why this Fiddle Warrior is sweeping into this. This has already been fully soaked. He's probably just doing it for good play. When you go into the intermission, this is going to be a journey. So they have the Void Orbs. They're still dealing with these Void Orbs just because there's a few people who are way too spread out. Probably a squishy spec who thought they couldn't live, and people were still moving around. During this intermission, while we're doing all this stuff, Salataf is going to reappear, and she's going to kill the boss, and she's going to repeat the moves. Right here, Salataf kills Ezzorak. He's doing the Void Howl. This is the orb mechanic. You see all 20 people have the orb mechanic, and some people have the spread mechanic. You notice everyone is still inside this white bubble. The spacing gets very tight here, especially the more you go into the fight, because clearly they just have the 2 Cume orbs. There's going to be more Cume orbs over the fight. Salataf's then going to kill another one. This time it's going to be Vaelgor. This is No Beam. This is the Tank Buster. That's going to do the tether mechanic afterwards. You're going to notice the tank has no idea that this is happening, and they're just going to blast the Tank Buster straight at the raid. Salataf copies Vaelgor for Dread Breath. This person has a feel. It's on the Fury Warrior. He's trying to get out for his feel mechanic as desperate as he can. And then right there you saw the No Beam tether had just formed, and they're now doing the tether break with the swirlies, and then the last person breaking has the big lot damage. And then the last killing, they summon Vaelgor for another Dread Breath, and this person has to run out. There's no telling what the order is. This is literally the only pull people have with the boss. Literally just wait until Mythic to figure out what this overlap is. As for timers of the fight, the most important timers for people to recognize is around 2 minutes. You have this intermission. Let me swap it over to Ezzorak just so we get a few extra timers. Right, so we have an intermission around 2 minutes and 4:10. This is the single target big ad, and then the main little ads that we constantly have to AoE boost down. It's around 30 seconds, 110, 220, 330, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. So to be aware of that, again, just look at logs, figure out what your spec is supposed to do on these fights. That is it for Vaelgor and Ezzorak.